I have spent a lifetime at the bedside helping people hold on to the one thing that keeps them free, strong legs. And the quiet truth is that a common morning habit can drain that strength before the sun is high. We were raised to believe a familiar breakfast is always safe. Yet many morning plates act like a gentle hand on a dimmer switch, turning down the power in your thighs without a sound. If you have ever stood up after breakfast and felt a soft wobble or a wave of tiredness you did not expect, your body was sending a careful warning. The fix does not require a brand new diet or an athlete's discipline. It begins with a protein-first bite and a brief leg wake up before you take on the day. Here is why I ask you to start there. As we move through later decades, the body naturally gives up some muscle, a quiet process that medicine calls age-related muscle loss. That change makes every choice at breakfast matter more. Many sweet and refined starters rush sugar into the blood. Your insulin surges to catch it, and the small fire that follows can nudge inflammatory signals that make muscle fibers less responsive. That is the morning story behind heavy legs and mid-morning stumbles. A protein-first bite steers around that trap. Eggs, strained yogurt, or another simple protein bring in the amino acid leucine, the tiny spark that turns on muscle building at a time of life when that switch is harder to flip. The upside is steadier energy, surer steps, and a body that feels ready rather than sleepy. The downside is also worth naming. If you load your plate too heavy or jump to extreme changes, you may feel weighed down or miss which small shift actually helped. So we start modest and wise. Before your coffee cools, take a few slow sips of water. Choose a protein-first bite. Then stand by the counter and lift one foot a few inches while you breathe. Then switch feet. You are not training for a marathon. You are reminding your brain and your legs to speak clearly to each other before you ask them for balance and power. I will show you the full routine and the foods that truly support older muscle. But for now, hold this simple picture. A calmer rise in blood sugar instead of a sharp spike, a little more high-quality protein instead of a plate of empty comfort, and a minute of gentle leg activation instead of rushing out the door. That is how you protect the strength you rely on to climb the porch steps, to carry groceries, to hug a grandchild without searching for the nearest chair. Stay with me. By the time your next breakfast rolls around, you will know exactly how to build a morning that keeps your legs steady and your independence close. Most people begin the day with the quiet faith that breakfast will lift their energy. Yet, I have seen over and over again that, for many older adults, the very first plate of the morning quietly drains the strength out of their legs before noon. That loss is not dramatic at first. It can be as subtle as a stumble on the way to the bathroom, or an unusual heaviness in the thighs while rising from the breakfast table. Still, the roots are deep. Meals built around refined starches flood the bloodstream with sugar, the pancreas answers with a surge of insulin, and the fire that follows calls out inflammatory messengers that dampen the way muscles respond. It is as if the connection between brain and leg is briefly muffled, leaving every step less secure. National surveys confirm the consequence. Roughly 1 in 4 adults over 65 reports a fall each year. And many of those incidents occur in the morning hours, a time when the body should feel at its strongest. The apparent benefit of a familiar breakfast is speed and comfort, but the hidden cost is loss of stability, weakness that lingers, and greater dependence on a chair or a railing. The encouraging side is just as real. In trials where older men and women replaced refined starches with protein and complex fibers, their blood sugar rose more gently, their energy held steadier, and their balance scores improved within weeks. The trade-off is honest. Choosing a steadier meal may ask you to shop differently or to learn a new recipe, yet the payoff is independence that lasts far longer. You may feel attached to the ritual of toast and juice, but I ask you to listen to the language of your own body. If your legs feel heavier after breakfast than before, that is not just age speaking, that is food-stealing strength that you can reclaim. Stay with me, Because in the next step, I will reveal the hidden culprit that sits on countless tables and yet almost no one suspects. We were all raised to believe that a bowl of cereal or a slice of toast was the safe way to greet the morning. But what I have seen in both clinic and research is that much of that food is no more gentle than candy. The moment finely milled flour hits the stomach, it breaks down so quickly that sugar floods the blood faster than even table sugar. The body answers with a rush of insulin, and along with that surge comes a cascade of inflammatory messengers that behave like alarms ringing through your muscles. It is as if the signal from your brain to your thighs is drowned out by static, leaving every step weaker than it should be. That explains why so many older men and women feel steady while sitting at the table but notice a heavy drag in their legs an hour later. The danger grows when this pattern repeats morning after morning. Muscles begin to lose the memory of how to respond with full strength. And past a certain age, that memory is difficult to recover. The surface-level benefit of those quick-starch breakfasts is easy to see. They are cheap, familiar, and convenient. The hidden cost is harder to face: weaker muscles, greater risk of falls, and a quiet slide into dependence that no one imagines when pouring cereal. On the other side, a breakfast built around protein and fiber slows the rise of sugar, keeps the communication line between brain and muscle clear, and preserves energy well into the morning. The challenge is only that it may ask you to change habits you have carried for decades, or to spend a few extra minutes preparing food. But the reward is balance, stability, and the confidence to walk without fear. I want to show you how this played out in real life. And in the next part, you will meet a woman who thought her morning routine was healthy until she discovered it was quietly robbing her legs of strength. This is the moment that surprises almost everyone. The hidden thief of leg strength for so many older adults is not a rare chemical with a long name, but the most ordinary flour that fills our kitchens. That same refined white flour is baked into the slice of toast you spread with butter, poured into the cereal bowl you thought was wholesome, folded into the muffin at the cafe, stacked in pancakes, and even disguised inside breads labeled as whole grain. It is so familiar that few people ever stop to ask what it really does inside the body. Once swallowed, it behaves like fuel that burns too hot and too fast, flooding the system with sugar and leaving behind the smoke of inflammation that clogs the message line between brain and muscle. Picture starting each morning by pouring sugar water into an engine built for steady fuel. The machine may run for a time, but it will sputter, slow, and wear down long before its years. That is how daily flour-based breakfasts treat the aging body. The easy advantage is clear. These foods are quick, cheap, and backed by decades of advertising that stamp them as healthy. The quiet disadvantage is that they strip away muscle power, raise the odds of stumbles, and chip at independence meal by meal. The hopeful part is that once you see the pattern, you can choose to step aside. Knowledge turns betrayal into strength. I remember one retired teacher who followed the same breakfast ritual for years, believing she was protecting her health, only to discover that the very routine she trusted was stealing her legs from under her. In the next part, I will tell you her story, because her experience shows just how simple it is to be misled and just how powerful it is to reclaim strength with one small change. Let me introduce you to Margaret, a 72-year-old retired school teacher who once looked me in the eye and said she no longer trusted her own legs. She had always carried herself with pride, a woman who believed in standing tall, yet each morning she found herself pressing hard on the arms of her chair just to rise. A short walk to the mailbox left her breathless and unsteady. When she asked her doctor why, she was told it was simply age. When she spoke with her children, they suggested gently that it might be time to consider assisted living. For Margaret, that felt like the world closing in. She clung to her breakfast ritual of toast and orange juice because it felt safe, because it felt responsible. The surface advantage of that habit was comfort, the kind that told her she was doing the right thing. The hidden disadvantage was the slow erosion of strength and confidence that followed her into every step. When she finally learned that the flour in her toast and the sugar in her juice were stripping her muscles, she felt betrayed, even angry, that no one had warned her. Yet in that anger was also a spark. She chose to change. She swapped the bread for eggs, traded the juice for water and fresh berries, and within weeks, she noticed she could rise from her chair without using both hands. The upside was more than stronger legs. It was the return of dignity, the quiet joy of walking across a room without fear of falling. The downside was only that it asked her to let go of foods she had leaned on for decades and to face a few mornings of trial and error. But the reward was worth every bit of effort. In just a few months, she was walking the length of her street with a steadiness that made her doctor shake his head in surprise. Margaret's journey is a reminder that what you place on your plate each morning can either shrink your life or expand it. In the next part, I will tell you exactly which foods gave her back that strength so you can see how simple the change can be. What Margaret embraced and what I now teach as the breakfast strength protocol is not a fancy product or a passing trend. It is the quiet shift in the very first meal of the day that alters the way your muscles hear your brain. Instead of piling the plate with quick-burning starches that flare and fade like sparks, you choose foods that deliver slow fire, steady fuel, and the raw material muscles crave. The beauty of this change is its simplicity. There is no need for powders or pills, only the courage to swap old habits for choices that speak directly to the needs of a body past 60. Picture the difference between toast that dissolves into sugar in minutes and a pair of eggs that deliver amino acids for hours. Imagine trading a muffin for a bowl of Greek-style yogurt thick with protein, or turning away from a sweet cereal toward warm oatmeal, stirred with seeds that hold both fiber and minerals. Each of these foods builds a foundation rather than pulling it away. The upside is real and measurable. Within a few short weeks, many men and women tell me they rise from chairs without wobble. They feel less drained as the morning stretches on, and their walks to the mailbox no longer feel like uphill climbs. Within a few months, they report longer strides, easier staircases, and the quiet joy of carrying groceries without fear of stumbling. The downside is also real. It means letting go of the foods that comforted you for decades, standing in the market aisle to read labels with new eyes, and living through a handful of mornings when the new routine feels strange. But when weighed against the return of strength, balance, and dignity, those small inconveniences vanish. The science is plain. A protein-first bite flips the muscle-building switch that age has been turning down, while fiber slows the blood sugar ride that leaves legs heavy and unsteady. It is a modest change, but it pays back more than any supplement I could prescribe. Independence does not begin with medicine. It begins with what you place on your plate when the sun rises. Stay with me now, because I will show you in detail the very foods that gave Margaret her stride back, and that can just as surely steady yours. When Margaret began to live the strength protocol, she did not sweep her cupboards bare in a single day. She made one careful choice at a time. Her first step was as simple as boiling an egg. She discovered that the whole egg, yolk and all, carries the amino acids her muscles have been waiting for, and that the golden center holds leucine, the small but powerful signal that tells older muscle to start building again. The advantage was that within weeks, she rose from her chair with less effort. The disadvantage was that she had to unlearn the warnings she had heard for years about yolks being dangerous. Her next experiment was with oats. Not the instant packet she once tore open in a rush, but real rolled oats simmered with a spoonful of chia seeds. They released energy slowly, steadied her mornings, and the seeds added minerals that quieted the cramps in her calves. The upside was the return of calm energy that carried her through the late morning. The downside was that it asked for a few more minutes at the stove and a willingness to accept a gentler flavor. She then brought Greek-style yogurt to her table. Thick, tangy, and rich with protein, it gave her muscles a steady stream of amino acids that lasted long after breakfast. The advantage was stronger, steadier walks as the day wore on, The disadvantage was learning to enjoy a taste far less sweet than the flavored yogurts she once favored. After that, she gave bananas another chance. She had avoided them for years, fearing their sugar, yet she learned that they carry potassium, the mineral that keeps muscles from twitching and cramping. The upside was nights without the sharp sting of calf cramps. The downside was remembering to eat them alongside protein so that the sugar did not act alone. In time, she added salmon to her week, a food she once thought belonged only at dinner. Twice a week, she seared a piece in her skillet and found that its omega-3 oils eased the soreness that followed long walks and sharpened her balance. The advantage was confidence in her stride. The disadvantage was the cost and the planning that fish requires. But when Margaret looked at these changes together, she saw the truth. None of them were exotic. They were ordinary foods chosen with new wisdom, and they gave her back mornings that felt steady, afternoons filled with movement, and evenings without fear of stumbling. That is what small choices on the plate can return: the freedom to move through life on your own terms. Margaret came to see that the food on her plate was only half the story. Her mornings grew even steadier when she combined those meals with simple rituals that cost nothing and asked for little more than attention. She began by steaming a sweet potato until it was soft and sprinkling it lightly with natural sea salt. Unlike the toast that once spiked her sugar, the sweet potato released its energy slowly and carried minerals that soothed the very muscles she depended on. The advantage was hours of smooth fuel and fewer spells of fatigue. The disadvantage was that it demanded a bit more time than sliding bread into a toaster. She also started each day with a glass of warm water and a pinch of mineral salt. That small step eased her circulation and kept away the dizziness that had sometimes greeted her mornings. The upside was a calmer transition from rest to movement. The downside was learning to accept a taste that felt unusual at first. Margaret gave herself a 3-minute leg wake-up, standing tall at the counter and lifting each foot a few inches while holding steady. The advantage was strength and balance before she ever left the house. The disadvantage was that it took discipline to pause and not rush straight into chores. She learned not to spring from bed, but to sit slowly, breathe, and rotate her ankles, giving her body the chance to wake its circulation. The upside was fewer early stumbles. The downside was practicing patience in a world that hurries us along. She opened her curtains or stepped onto her porch to claim a few minutes of morning light. The benefit was a rise in mood and a natural dose of vitamin D that strengthened her bones. The drawback was the challenge of cloudy days, and she made sure not to let hunger stretch too long after waking. Even half a sweet potato or a single egg protected her muscles from being broken down for energy. The advantage was preserving strength. The disadvantage was that she had to think ahead and keep something ready. None of these choices were dramatic, but together, they reshaped her mornings into a foundation of stability. They reminded her that independence is built not with grand gestures but with quiet, consistent steps that speak directly to the needs of an aging body. As I watched Margaret step into each day with steadier legs, I knew what I had seen in so many others was true. We are not prisoners of age. Getting older does not have to mean getting weaker. Our muscles still listen. They still respond when we give them the message of proper food, gentle movement, and consistent care. The advantage of holding this truth is freedom. The freedom to leave your bed in the morning with trust in your body instead of fear of falling. The disadvantage is that it asks for commitment, patience, and the courage to believe that change is possible even now. Too many good people surrender to the myth that weakness is inevitable. They hand over their independence too soon, leaning on a cane, a chair, or a facility long before it is truly needed. But when you decide to act, even with the smallest steps, the story changes. Margaret showed us that independence can be rebuilt, one meal, one glass of water, one careful rise from bed at a time. I want you to imagine walking your garden without clinging to the railing, carrying groceries into your kitchen without resting halfway, bending to hug a grandchild without wondering whether you can stand again. These are not dreams. They are the natural rewards of steady choices made each morning. The risk of waiting is that each day of delay allows muscles to slip further into silence. The reward of starting now is that each day begins to restore what you feared was gone. Aging brings its own trials, but it does not demand surrender. With the right habits, you stop being a passive patient and become the active guardian of your own strength. That is the truth I want you to carry. You are not powerless. You are not too late. And tomorrow can find you standing taller and moving freer than you did today. Now I want to place the choice in your hands. You have heard the story of Margaret and seen how ordinary foods and quiet rituals turned her mornings from weakness to strength. The advantage of acting on this message is that you are never alone. When you say aloud the step you will take, when you share it with a friend or with me here, you create a bond of accountability and encouragement that makes change stick. The disadvantage of keeping silent is that change attempted in secret often fades away because habits are fragile when they live in isolation. So I ask you directly, which step will you take first? Will it be a boiled egg instead of toast, a glass of warm water at your bedside, or a few minutes of sunlight on your porch? Name it, claim it, and let that declaration mark the start of your strength. And do not stop there. Think of someone you know, a friend who has spoken of heavy legs, a partner who struggles to rise, a neighbor who has stumbled on the steps. Sharing this knowledge could be the hand they need to steady themselves. The benefit of creating this community is that each story told strengthens another. Each voice becomes proof that weakness is not inevitable. The drawback of silence is that too many will keep believing they are powerless. So let us not be silent. Let us build a circle of strength that grows with every choice, every comment, every shared truth. Tomorrow morning, when you stand in your kitchen, pause and ask yourself one simple question. Is this plate stealing from me, or is it giving back? Your answer will shape not just your day, but your independence. And if this message has touched you, add your voice, join this conversation, and pass it forward so that together we can continue uncovering the quiet truths that keep our legs strong and our lives our own.